Hello and welcome to Wake and Bake News, and I'm your host, Shampoo VTA, and today I am bankrupt, but it's still a wonderful day in California. Today is the day that the Adult Use of Marijuana Act announced that it had more than enough signatures for the ballot in November. Now, actually, reading the article, I stumbled across something that was very interesting. They had quoted our police chief, Corney, right? And he's also the head of the police association, right? For this part of, I guess, the counties. Okay. And we've seen him before. He was at the meeting, the original meeting we went to with the city council. And we particularly remember his attitude towards everything. He didn't seem, he's toting the line. He's too smart to, he's smart. He knows that they've lost this battle. He's going to tote the line for the police unions and stuff, but he's smart enough to understand what's going on here. And yet, he's not smart enough to have seen that a trap was laid for him in the last 3 years. And I'm like, now just seeing it, and I'm like, whoa. Why are they mentioning him in this article in the LA Times about the signature gathering? I'll tell you why. Because this is a general quote that they're taking out of basically the blue ribbon panel that Gavin Newsom ran last year. So apparently what Gavin Newsom did with some of these other guys is he went to different communities around California and he allowed stakeholders to come forward and, voice their concerns. And which sounds like a perfectly legit process, but now that I'm looking at another video from 2 years ago, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. No, this is a trap. And this is a trap that was laid like 2.5 years ago. It's very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to read to you the article about this, and then we're going to get into the next, about this police chief and some of the things I know about, not necessarily him, but what's going on here, and especially this other video I'm going to go to. All right, so let's first look at the story.
LATimes.com. California voters get chance to fully legalize marijuana. A measure to legalize marijuana for recreational use in California appears headed for the November 8th ballot. A coalition that includes former Facebook president Sean Parker on Tuesday said it was collecting 600,000 signatures, more than enough to qualify the initiative. Tiki. Sorry. Democratic Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and other supporters of the measure plan to kick off a campaign for voter approval of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act on Wednesday in San Francisco. Pardon me. The measure would allow adult ages 21 and older to possess, transport, and use up to an ounce of marijuana for recreational purposes, and would allow individuals to grow as many as 6 plants. This November, California voters will finally have the opportunity to pass smart marijuana policy that is built on the best practices of other states, including the strictest child protection in the nation, and pay for itself while raising billions for the state, Newsom said in a statement. The coalition, which includes some law enforcement and civil rights leaders, needed to collect 365,880 signatures of registered voters to qualify the initiative, which would also place a 15% tax on retail sales of the drug. The use of marijuana in public and while driving would remain illegal. Parker, a billionaire who also co-founded the file-sharing service Napster, donated more than $1 million to the campaign to collect signatures and qualify the initiative. From what I understand, he's pledged at least $10 million. If election officials verify that the signatures turned in Wednesday are sufficient and voters approve the initiative, California would join Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and Oregon as states that allow recreational use of marijuana. Opposition is already organizing behind groups such as Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, which formed to defeat a 2010 legalization initiative that was rejected by 35% of the voters. Marijuana is a very dangerous drug, said Scott Chipman, a San Diego businessman who is the Southern California chairman of the group. The state has not proven it has the capacity or the will to properly regulate marijuana, and so they won't. The measure is also opposed by the California Police Chiefs Association, in part because problems that have arisen in Colorado. No, more like apparently there's a bunch of law enforcement guys from some sort of drug task force that go around the country moonlighting and telling other police forces about the horrors that are not apparently actually happening in Colorado. They're just getting paid to tell people what they want to hear. And of course, here we touch on something close to home. And I thought this was interesting. Ventura Police Chief Ken Corney, president of the Association of the Police Chiefs Association and police chief here in Ventura County, said extremely potent marijuana is being sold in Colorado that he fears will lead to high addiction rates and high incidence of psychosis. That makes him sound like a right nut job. This is bad for our community. This is bad for our youth, and it's a broad commercialization of drugs, a for-profit money-making model, Cordy said. And that's the part of the story I want you to remember, and I will come back to this quote again after I show you a little video in which he spoke at the local hospital on legalizing marijuana. And we're going to talk about this, who's going to be making the money and who he's actually in competition with. It gets very interesting. More than 55% of California voters allow the use of marijuana for medical purposes in 1996 when they approved Proposition 215. Despite the defeat of a 2010 legalization initiative, a poll last year by the Public Policy Institute of California found that 55% of likely voters in California favor full legalization. I'm excited to be part of one of the largest coalitions of cannabis and non-cannabis organizations to come together to push this initiative forward, said Nate Bradley, Executive Director of the California Cannabis Industry Association. That's funny because the guy that's the head of the police association and the police chief for my town, it does not sound excited. I've heard him not excited before, and I know why. He's smart enough to know that he's going to lose this fight, that they're going to lose this fight. Bradley, who backed the failed 2010 initiative, said voters have since seen how well legalized recreational use has worked in other states. Newsom, who is running for governor in 2018, formed a Blue Ribbon Commission on marijuana policy that made recommendations, many of which were incorporated into the initiative. The measure is supported by the Drug Policy Alliance, Marijuana Policy Project, California Cannabis Industry Association, California Medical Association, California NAACP, and the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. The Medical Association said in a statement that it supports the measure because the most effective way to protect the public's health is to tightly control, track, and regulate marijuana, and to comprehensively research and educate the public on its health impacts, not through ineffective prohibition. Supporters hope to build on the momentum from the legislature's action last year to set up regulations for the medical marijuana industry in California. The new initiative would expand on that, renaming the State Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulations as the Bureau of Marijuana Control. Interesting also that this article ends on that falls in line with the medical marijuana regulations that the state put into place this last summer and Jerry Brown signed. And you know who else is going to talk about that in the next video I'm going to show you? It's going to be this police chief who said 2 years ago that if these things were brought up, that he would have a different attitude towards legalization. And now that they have local control and he has everything he asked for, he's still unhappy. Isn't this interesting?
Now, you remember how I said that so many of these clown newspapers like the LA Times, Ventura County Star are robots, that they're actually robots. The way they write, I mean, if they're not robots, if they're humans, it's, how did you even fucking graduate from high school writing like this? Okay, there's really not very much of real meat in any of these stories. All that was announced was that they have the signatures, and the rest is pure padding. So the quote that they have here from our police chief has got to be over a year old. And he went around doing this at every place, I guess, it would listen to him, because he has some sort of a degree in communication skills. And apparently that's what he's really there to do, is sort of be the PR guy for all this stuff. Okay, and how do I know all this? Well, because of one of the doctors at Community Memorial Hospital here held a seminar about the efficacy of medical marijuana, invited 2 of his dear friends, and contacted the police chief to ask him if he would like to join the panel. And the police chief jokingly tells this wonderful story about how he thought it was a joke. And he thought maybe one of the retired cops was pulling his leg, and they're all laughing in this. Ha, 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 ha. I'll show you the video of the police chief's speech, okay? Because he got to speak at the end, right? And after watching the video again 2 years later, I realized what I'm seeing now. They set him up and knocked him out of the park. He didn't want to show up to that, because he knew that if he showed up to that, he would lend authority to their conversation. Instead of a bunch of doctors just talking about the efficacy, to get a cop to sit in there. And then I noticed he's not wearing his uniform. He's wearing like some kind of a little sports jacket. And he came in there thinking that he was going to have to go, oh, this is ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. Because remember, this was 2 years ago. Many of the studies that were out at the time have been refuted since then. Okay, so here's how this is. If I'm going to link to the entire video, because it's now on YouTube. But if you look at the ebb and flow of this video, basically the doctor comes on and he says this. This is a digested version of it. He comes on and he says, I have 2 patients. And this has caused me to ask a question. I have a patient who's, say, 65 and has cancer, and she's interested in using medical marijuana to fight her cancer. On the other hand, I have an 18-year-old from Ventura High School who has a medical marijuana license and smokes marijuana on a regular basis and says she got it from a doctor in Los Angeles and that she uses it for the many complaints of being a teenager. And everyone laughs. Ha, 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 ha. That was a setup. That was a setup. They kept feeding the cop what he wanted to hear. So he's like, I just have these concerns. And having these patients come up to me, who said this recently? Walgreens. Oh, yes. We just ran this because we had some concerns. I'm like, something's going on. Nobody's got concerns. Nobody pays any fucking attention to patients coming up to them one way or the other and asking them questions, and they sure as hell don't fucking form a forum over it. Okay, you know what? Then the guy thanks a whole bunch of people in the staff, and one of them is some kind of like communications dude or PR guy or whatever for the hospital. And I'm like, that's why he's thanking him, because that guy said, you better get on this ball now because it's going to start rolling and make us a lot of money. So he invited the cop. The cop said, I thought it was a friend calling and making jokes, so I didn't answer the call. No, he fucking knew that this was a doctor from this hospital, because my husband knew who it was. And my husband used to work there, so he recognized him immediately. Oh yeah, I know him. I've seen him around the hospital. But the police officer for our town was like, I had to Google you to see if you were real. He knew damn well he was real. And they all laugh. It was just a misunderstanding. Well, when the doctor guy comes back up, after the cop speaks, he goes, oh, the police chief is being modest. In fact, I had to practically stalk him to get him to come here. Oh, wow. I watched that video again, and I'm going to link you to it, and I'm going to show you parts that I think are really important. But they played that guy like an old fiddle. And I became very aware that he was way out of his league. Because first the doctor comes in with, I don't know what's going on, I have some questions. Then he invites a girl up that is very positive for marijuana, and you can see the police guys, the police chief's body language goes to hell. But the girl sitting next to him stays perfectly respectful, rigid. He doesn't even acknowledge her sitting next to him. He's like this, like this. He's taking notes because he's seeing what he can draw off of from what they say to build on his argument. See, so he's taking notes, copious little notes, and okay, I can use that one. That's a good one, and he's listening, right? So then the girl that's sitting next to him's turn is up to speak. Now she's the third one, and she comes in with, I'm just not sure about this marijuana thing. I mean, there's all these studies that say that it could cause you to have lung cancer, or it could affect a teenager's brain. And she does all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, she doesn't believe any of this. Because at the time that I saw this video, it infuriated me because those studies were pertinent, and all of that science has now been thrown out because even the federal government admits that their science is run under a monopoly, and that's not science. Science has to be able to be peer reviewed. How do you peer review something when you can't even get a hold of the fucking same marijuana because the government won't give it to you? So she knew that, didn't she? She must have known that 2 years ago. So she gives him some stuff he can hang on to, and he makes copious little notes. Then it's his turn to speak, and I'm going to play that now. And if you listen, he does the usual cop bleep bleep bloppity bloop, and you can tell he's got the look. Every cop in this community has their head shaved balder than an egg. You know why? Because this is the please don't shoot me, I'm not the cop that pissed you off last time look. They all look the same. Back when Starsky and Hutch was super popular, there used to be two motorcycle cops who would take turn parking under the underpass over by Salzer's, and they both had mustaches because that was the look back then. They got the look. They got the look. Same mustache on every cop in this town. Every cop in this town used to have the same mustache during the 80s. Same mustache. Then somehow they flipped the script in the early 2000s to shave the head. Shave the head. Everybody shave your head. Shave, 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 shave. So most of the cops in this town have their head shaved, right? So they look exactly alike. Some kind of tactic. It has to do with the uniforms and them being heartless, mindless humans. I will get you. They all look like, they're fighting the worst case of lice ever on Earth. Geez, his case of lice was so bad he had to shave his head. Okay. It goes back to the Praetorian Guard. It goes back to the Roman soldiers. The Roman soldiers cut their hair short so they could tell the difference between them and the other people, the heathens, and everything that they had to fight, say, in Germany and shit like that. And they had to take a cohort of, or a battalion, or what did the fucking Roman guy used to call them? Where are my eagles? My Eagles! I guess it's like fucking different battalions of these soldiers and stuff. And he lost his Eagles in Germany because he's a fucking idiot. Okay. So this one cop, who with the communications, degree, he's got the look. Notice his hair is not shaved. And has tasteful little gray, yeah. And when he goes up there, he's putting on John Wayne when he speaks. Don't see if you don't hear the well, partner, right? Especially at the beginning, he comes in like John Wayne. And in fact, I know that the bullshit in this community is so heavy over this cop that there is an article in the news about a lady who was doing local portraits, and guess what one of the paintings was? In his uniform. Local faces of Intra. And one of them just happens to be the police chief. Talk about polishing somebody's knob, boy. And then the picture in the paper is him standing next to the painting, and the artist there, like, I painted the police officer. Now he won't pull me over and give me a ticket. I don't know what, and it all seems so friendly. Well, so does this meeting that I'm going to show you right now. And it's not friendly. If you view the entire meeting, you sense, even in the audience, there are people in that audience don't want to hear from that cop and don't think he has any business being at any kind of a meeting talking about medicine. Really, this is fun. Now I'm having a ball with this. On top of all of this other stuff that I pointed out about him, he was working with the Chamber of Commerce for California, right? The Chamber of Commerce for California cities that put in the local ordinances for local control. So as the police association, person, head, he was working to create the local controls. And in this video, he says, if they would just regulate this thing, maybe my attitude would be different. 2 years later, it's regulated, and guess what? I'll bet you the guy's attitude ain't any different. And now we know who got suckered big time. Him directly. Because everything that's now collapsing is collapsing because of guys like him getting suckered by very intelligent people. Like, for instance, at Community Memorial Hospital. That just went like the Harlem Globetrotters, spinning the ball. Meadowlark Lemon, man, because they brought this guy in and they fed him information. He took it. And you can watch him in this meeting sit there and take copious notes on literally things that they told him that 2 years later aren't worth the paper he wrote them on. I'm starting to think that this thing's been falling apart for a hell of a long time, and there are people in a very high echelons of power that's been planning this for a long, maybe 10 years. And none of these clowns had any idea this was going on. And that's why you see them all today flat-footed with stories like that we got enough signature, and it even gets worse. CNN is utterly flat-footed about a story about Germany is now going to legalize in 2017. It's so pathetic. The majority of the story is just a history lesson about, they literally are just lifting from other stories, and the beginning is basically an announcement, and the rest is just because they just don't know what to say. They even slapped Sanjay Gupta's video at the top because they couldn't even come up with the video. They just went, rehash that thing. Get that. See, we were right. There's a lot going on here. So let's take a look.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our ongoing Ethics in Healthcare Speakers series, where we examine important and controversial issues where medicine and society intersect. It's completely wonderful to see all of you here tonight. Thank you all very much for coming out on this beautiful Thursday. My name is Dr. Jim Hornstein. I am the chairman of the Bioethics Committee at the Community Memorial Health System, and it's my pleasure to moderate tonight's program. Medical marijuana is an ethics problem, is frankly much more fundamental, and that is this. Just because something is legal doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do or it's a good thing to do. And let me give you a very practical example. Everybody knows cigarette smoking is legal, right? Cigarette smoking is legal, but nobody would say that it's either the right thing to do or a good thing to do, okay, although it's legal. So I think you get my point. Just being legal doesn't necessarily make something right or make something ethical. But what if somebody directly asks you, is taking medical marijuana the correct and ethical thing to do for that particular patient? And let me share with you, that is exactly what happened to me twice in my medical office this month. The first patient, I'll share with you, of course, I won't tell you who they are, but this first patient is a 78-year-old woman who unfortunately has breast cancer and is constantly nauseated by her chemotherapy. Despite trying 3 commonly used anti-nausea medications, she still feels sick to her stomach every day. A friend suggested that maybe marijuana might help her symptoms, and as a patient of mine for over 20 years, she came into my office and asked me my medical advice. She said, "Doctor, what should I do? Should I take medical marijuana?" A very real patient in a very real circumstance with a very real indication. The question is, what should I tell her? Let me tell you the second patient that walked into my office this month. This patient is an 18-year-old female who's a junior at a local high school in Ventura. She's an 18-year-old junior. She presented to my office relatively commonly with a cough and a fever. Who hasn't had a cough and a fever this month? But when I asked her several other questions, and I asked her specifically, did she smoke, she actually started to giggle, and she said, "You mean cigarettes?" And I said, "Well, cigarettes or anything else?" She goes, "No, I would never touch cigarettes, but marijuana, well, that's a whole different story." And then she actually did something that had never happened to me before in my practice. She took out a physician's statement and recommendation, which she got based on California Health and Safety Code 11362.5, which she pointed out to me I'd never seen, which she got from a licensed physician in Los Angeles for $65 in a 15-minute doctor interview without any exam, and which she now uses to justify smoking 2 to 3 marijuana joints daily, including during school days. Now, when I asked her why she was using medical marijuana, she said, "Oh, absolutely, very simply, to treat her ongoing symptoms." And I asked her, what were those symptoms? And she said they were difficulty studying, and her mother said she was moody. Okay. Do you ever see that in teenagers? I don't know. I'm not sure I ever had that experience, at least that minute. She also went on to say that she actually liked the Los Angeles doctor who she saw for 15 minutes and plans on seeing him again when her prescription for medical marijuana, which she uses 3 times a day, expires in 1 year. So her prescription was for 1 year, or her recommendation. So I bring up these 2 cases to point out how common these kind of situations are in real clinical medicine in a lovely town like Ventura, but also to clarify several other important points about tonight's discussion. Firstly, our topic tonight is marijuana as medicine, and our focus will be on the medical uses, on the benefits, and on the risk of medicinal marijuana. Now, although I realize there is certainly some overlap, we will not be focusing on the legalization of marijuana purely for recreational purposes. That's a legitimate question, one we will not be discussing tonight. Now, I'm stressing this because the goal for tonight is not advocacy, either for or against, but rather education and engagement. Our final speaker is the Chief of Police for the Ventura Police Department, Chief Ken Corney. Chief Corney was born on the East Coast, but has lived in Ventura since 1970. He received his AA degree from our own Ventura College and his bachelor's degree in journalism and public relations from California State University at Long Beach. He has a master's degree in business and organizational management. We're the alumni. We'll be doing some fundraising at the end of this. Where was I? Business and professional organizational management from some university, and is and is also a graduate of the Senior Management Institute for Policing at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Veritas, anybody here? All right, okay. He has served with distinction with the Ventura Police Department for 28 years and has been police chief since 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our stage Chief of Police Ken Corney. Thank you.
Well, good evening. So I want to start off with how I got here. I think back in July, my phone rang. I was in my office, and I think I actually picked it up, which is, I didn't recognize the number. It was somebody who identified themselves as Dr. Hornstein and invited me to participate in a discussion on medical marijuana, the ethics of medical marijuana. And my immediate response was, who is this really? I thought it was one of the old retired guys playing a joke on me, or one of my peers at work thinking that would be funny, so I hung up. Phone rang again. This time my secretary picks it up and said, there's a Dr. Jim Hornstein on the phone, and he's wants to talk to you about speaking. And I said, let me Google that. I'm joking, but sure enough. So I was actually surprised to get the phone call, and I gave a lot of consideration to this, as the doctor knows, and thought about what my role in this discussion is, and what value I could bring, and then again, I think the immediate assumption is, well, the police are going to come here and tell you why not to do everything or do something that's illegal, and we're not. Law enforcement, enforcing laws, is a tool of policing, but policing is really about harm reduction and having a safe community for all of us to live in. So, and that's certainly my goal as police chief. So when I came down to kind of coming on what the topic I would talk about in terms of what were the ethics of medical marijuana, I want to address the dispensary system in California, and that came along with the passage of Prop 215. So I just want to go off by saying that I think the lack of any statewide health and safety standards has caused a pretty big problem for legitimate patients and their caregivers in California. And one example that I was told was a director of an emergency room services in a hospital in Orange County treats his epileptic daughter with high CBD marijuana oil, medical marijuana oil. So we talked about that, and that treating kids with epilepsy. Okay, and this is a doctor in an emergency room. Okay, he obtains the CBD oil, then he sends it out to a private lab to make sure it's not contaminated or doesn't have high THC, remember the stuff that makes you high in it. So, of course, his medical background clearly benefits him in being able to do this. But there are a lot of patients, parents, caregivers and stuff who don't have those kind of resources and are kind of trapped within our system of unregulated medical marijuana in the state of California. And in other states, too. There's just little regulation here. So while there's certainly professionals and knowledgeable dispensary owners and employees seeking to professionalize this industry and bring medical marijuana into legitimacy, Proposition 215 really didn't do a lot for that. There's no standards for medical marijuana, as I said, and dispensary owners and their employees don't even know much about that product they are selling. And could you imagine going to a pharmacy and getting a prescription and them saying, hey, what am I supposed to do with this? And there's no instructions. Dr. Snow talked about that a little bit. That doesn't occur at dispensaries. At least it's not required as a standard. if medical marijuana, if that industry in California were really aimed at legitimate patients and health, they would insist on professional standards and health and safety standards. And those weren't established in Prop 215 and have never been required in any of the dispensaries that have been opened in California. So I think until that's resolved, it will serve to undermine the legitimacy of medical marijuana, and especially in California to Prop 215. So now that I've talked about what some of my problems are, my issues are, let me talk about what I think could be done to improve the post-Prop 215 medical marijuana environment in California. Now, I want to preface this by saying my comments are not an endorsement of medical marijuana, or not an endorsement of the legalization of marijuana, or a gateway discussion into legalizing recreational marijuana. Just merely some thought-out perspectives that I've gained from my time as a police chief, but also my time in the profession dealing with other professionals who have examined this. First of all, we need to develop and implement a comprehensive framework for the implementation that provides local governments the authority to create and enforce locally driven policies to regulate medical marijuana. The Prop 215 passage created regulatory chaos. There's case law, nobody's quite sure what to do, state law, federal law, things like that. And it's created piecemeal legislation, and litigation was expensive for local government. So we need to straighten that out. Over the last year, there's been several bills that have come forward that have attempted to undermine or eliminate local control over these critical issues, such as municipal zoning, permit decisions, licensing and ordinances that are going to be cast down on a statewide basis and not letting local governments and local communities make these decisions. These bills also ignore public safety concerns about promoting recreational use. They limit local law enforcement's investigation powers and fail to address diversion of the product for cartel activities or security concerns at dispensary. And of course, finally, they don't include any health or safety oversight that's necessary for all other medicines. So last year, the California Police Chiefs Association worked together with the League of Cities to co-sponsor legislation. It was Senate Bill 1262 that for the first time would have effectively provided some local control over medical marijuana dispensaries, would have protected public safety and create uniform health and safety standards for the distribution of medical marijuana. I want to talk about those real quickly. First of all, it would uphold current law and build on existing policies that provides local control for regulating local medical marijuana facilities. It would require local medical marijuana dispensary owners to secure all local permits and to obtain a state license. It would took measures to help prevent. It would prevent recreational marijuana users from having easy access to medical marijuana. Too many M's in there. For non-medical purposes. So basically, it helps reduce the shell game of people using the medical marijuana system for recreational marijuana use. And it would create stronger tools for the California Medical Board to monitor and regulate doctors recommending medical marijuana and make inquiries and audit doctors under specific circumstances that are believed to be violating or abusing medical marijuana recommendations. So I want to summarize what I feel here by just saying that I'm a police chief, I'm not a doctor, I've never been to medical school. I know very little or understand very little in terms of what a doctor does about the cannabinoids and from a medical perspective. But what I can tell you is from a perspective of somebody who's spent almost 30 years in policing and has seen the impacts of drug and alcohol abuse with lack of adequate control and how it devastates individuals, families, and communities. So whatever we ultimately do with medical is that we have it fundamentally based on four goals of a sound drug policy. that I believe are to reduce the illegal use of drugs, to reduce the abuse of illegal drugs, and to reduce the harmful effects of those drugs on individuals and communities. There were three things. I think those are important fundamentals that we need to strive for in terms of how we move forward with medical marijuana in our community. So thank you for your time.
You know, I think the chief was being exceptionally modest when he described our conversation. When I called him on the verge of harassment, I think by the time I got through to him, and we had what I thought was a good conversation that lasted more than 45 seconds, the chief, I think, acknowledged that every cell in his body wanted to say no to being in a public lecture on medical marijuana. And I think it's a testimonial to his strength of character and to his view of leadership from where he stands that he actually is here today to represent what I think is an important voice in the community. So I think, could we please...
I'm going to link to that video. That video just recently became available on YouTube. It had been on Community Memorial's site for 2 years. I remember seeing it back when I was still working for the school district. It was one of the things that really woke me up that things were changing very dramatically. And then there was kind of a stall, and the local bands and all this kind of stuff. Well, I'm here to tell you that all of that stuff is about to fucking... You ever seen that game Ice Breakout or whatever? Put a little fucking doll on top of a bunch of blocks and plastic blocks that are supposed to be ice, and you sit there breaking out one piece at a time till the whole thing would collapse. Yeah, the whole thing's about to collapse. And nobody is believing me. And I'm like, oh no, this thing's about to flip big time. You're about to see everybody run because they know this isn't just, oh, hey, things changed. It's a race towards money. Even that police officer said, what did he say? The police chief, what's his name? Corny. Okay, what did he say? He said, this is a money grab. Guess by who? The hospital right here that's building a great big new fucking hospital. And I've got a good guess why. Because you are not going to be able to sue a doctor for over-medicating you on marijuana. Oxycodone and all that other shit they've given them to prescribe to people for pain. Because remember, pain is now considered a medical issue. It's no longer put the fuck up with it. If you are in pain, they have to treat you because of the way medicine works now. They didn't used to have to pay attention to your pain. Now, pain is part of your treatment. That's why so many people are ODing on oxycodone and getting addicted. The doctors are probably getting sued up the ass for overprescribing. Plus, now the federal government wants them to write down every time they write a prescription for painkillers, even if you're a dentist. Something that apparently doctors have never done before. They used to just give them out like Pez. Here, you need 5? There you go, take these. Yeah. I remember going into a doctor's office and him going, I have some samples here. Why don't you try this? You know? Now they have to write it all down. What do you think those doctors are thinking? Well, if I'm prescribing marijuana and somebody ODs, it's not going to kill them. They're going to survive. I'm not going to get sued for killing them. I think there are good reason for them to consider being on the side of this. I think they see that they're a hospital in a huge agricultural area, and that suddenly all those things could join together into an amazing symphony of you grow it, we sell it. That we're the manufacturers, that we sell, that we don't have to be necessarily so dependent all the time on pharmaceutical companies like Johnson & Johnson that just got fucking sued for $65 million because apparently talcum powder gives you cancer. Johnson & Johnson, who's another big industry here in Ventura. I wonder how many fucking employees they're going to lay off to pay for that. Things are moving. And nobody will tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. I'm watching and I see the cracks, huge cracks are forming now in the dam. Huge. I mean, this thing's, I mean, it's done. I mean, this is done. We win in November, and we're the 8th largest economy in the world, the first in America, second only to Texas. You think that the federal government is going to be, oh, no prohibition. No, marijuana is bad for you. No, it's going to be changing its tune. And it's going to have to change it into a tune we like. Sure, they can talk like, well, let's all be cautious. We don't want to move too quickly. But all of this bullshit about it's going to make you schizophrenic or psychotic or some bullshit like that is going the way, I mean, it's gone. It's done. I read, someone said this comment. They said, it's a tar pit. This is, hopefully California pulls himself out of the tar pit, is literally what they said. I was looking at some of the comments and I'm like, oh, there are some very astute comments here that are bringing up. And it was interesting that they picked on, because this story is from the San Francisco Gate, right? So why did they include a comment from a Ventura police chief? Because he's obviously a police chief association captain and all that stuff. But see, and we have a ban here. Don't you get it? This guy's the key. This cop is the linchpin key to this entire fucking puzzle. And he's getting cut down. And they know it. That's why they're quoting him. Also because he made quotes available. Okay, so the next story I'm going to read to you is kind of talking about how this is all starting to fall apart. Let me go look at this real quick because I wanted to check these comments. Ah, there it is. There's 213 comments. This is, oh, I'm sorry, LA Times. LA Times. I'm looking at the wrong thing. So why are they talking about this Ventura County Police Chief? Okay, LA Times, then the motivation's different because they always turn to the fucking cops. That this was the county, the sheriffs here were the ones that assessed a dude's $2 million property, then went, invaded the property on a drug raid. He went, who the fuck are, he thought he was fucking being robbed. He shot back because they didn't announce who they were. They killed him. There was not one pot plant on the property. It was a big fucking deal. And it has a lot to do with why we have bong shops on Main Street, because that's when things really started to fall apart around here. Okay, they're shit shows. So, and plus, there was another case where they were doing a drug raid and a really nice cop accidentally shot a rookie cop as he was coming through the back door, I guess. At least that was in the paper. Who knows if it's true or not, because apparently the paper can't get stories right. There was one report in our paper that a guy at a kung fu studio was robbed and shot by a friend. But the police said he was a pedophile that they went to go arrest and he killed himself. Same thing. Everybody in town saw it happen. My mother-in-law called and said, don't go over there near the college. Apparently, and she was all telling us about it. Ventura County Star reports it as robbery. Police department tells us through their tweets or whatever that it was a suicide because the guy was a pedophile. Apparently he was helping those students with their kung fu grip. What's going on? What's going on? Suddenly in Ventura County Star don't know what the fuck is going on anymore. So there's a lot happening here between the LA Times, the Ventura County Star, how they desperately turn to these guys for quotes, and how I think it's all about to collapse right all over top of them. Give me a second. I'm still kind of panning through these. I just wanted to look at the quotes. Now there's hundreds of them. I don't think I could find the comments that I originally looked at when this article came up a few hours ago. But there was some very interesting, insightful things. Like, for instance, you notice who's complaining about is the people that make money off of it. But it was very interesting about Corney being a public relations expert and his look compared to actually beat cops look. He doesn't have to worry about working in the street. You know, he's a police chief. Okay, so now I'm going to move into this. This is from San Francisco Gate, I apologize. California cities, counties warming to new marijuana laws. Things are collapsing. Fillmore is now going to allow deliveries. Guess where they're going to be delivering? Like I've said, we've had this huge thing in this town where selling fireworks is illegal. They sell these little popper things like you get in England when a kid has a birthday party and you pull it and it goes pop. Or they sell these little bags that you throw at the ground and they pop, right? Because you can't have fireworks here. Because everybody, and rightfully understanding, they're concerned about fire. Fire department has an absolutely good reason to be concerned about that. But if you light them out over the ocean, like we used to for years before everybody got so ninny about it, all right, it's perfectly safe. Maybe not great for the ocean, but at least the safety issues dealt with, right? And we still do it to this day. I shared a video with you on that. That's because their prohibition didn't mean dippity-doo-dah when it came to fireworks. It didn't stop fireworks from coming into our community at all. It made a free-for-all at the beach is what it did. A free-for-all, okay? And even we're, we're lighting, sparklers and shit in the drive. I mean, you know. And that's literally the entire town scofflawing 4th of July. Just going, yeah, it's illegal. And yeah, you're going to get a ticket. Everybody seems to be fine with that. They don't care. They're willing to take the ticket. Or they figure the next guy's going to get busted, not them. So now they're going to sell us our marijuana because those fireworks come from Fillmore. A lot of those fireworks come from Fillmore. I've always heard, I'm going to go to Fillmore to get some fireworks for the 4th of July because we're going to party. I don't know how many years I've heard that, but since I was in my 20s, I seems to remember I've always heard, hey, I'm going to Fillmore. Anybody want something? Anybody want, what do you want me to go for you? You want to go with me? Yeah. I'm going to Fillmore this weekend to get fireworks for the 4th of July. I've heard that a million times. And now it's going to be marijuana. There's going to be people smoking pot everywhere. The town will not get a dime of tax money. It won't even be participating in any of the windfall from this because they have bans here. I just don't see how the town can possibly maintain Little Boy Blue's finger in the dam trying to keep this dam from bursting. I mean, frankly, it looks impossible, doesn't it? So I'm going to read to you California cities, counties warming to new marijuana laws.
San Francisco Gate. California cities, counties warming to new marijuana laws. May 4, 2016, 9:43 a.m. California's cities and counties are rapidly warming to medical marijuana businesses, overturning long-time bans to approve dispensaries, deliveries, farms, edibles, kitchens, and labs. This week, the East Bay Express reported that Alameda County could license cannabis greenhouses and indoor cultivation on agricultural land by 2017. The county hopes to update its dispensary ordinance to allow edibles and extracts, as well as add 1 to 3 new pot shops by the fall. Supervisor Nate Miley said counties are like sleeping giants on this issue of cannabis, and Alameda County is among the first to stir. I think we are stirring just how much and how quickly, that's to be determined. But I'm going to keep pushing, he said. Miley said attorneys for every county in the state, the county councils, have met to discuss updating local laws to match the state's new Medical Marijuana Regulations and Safety Act. For the first time in 19 years, local officials have clear, black and white lines from state lawmakers on legal medical pot activity. MMRSA helps, said Miley. It provides the necessary regulatory cover for jurisdictions that want to move ahead with supporting medical cannabis. Alameda County is not alone in the past few weeks. Last night, the city of Oakland moved to add 8 new dispensaries per year, as well as licensed deliveries, labs, kitchens, and distribution warehouses. Marin County is moving to add its first licensed dispensary. The desert town of Cathedral City has approved medical cannabis cultivation. Monterey County is creating an ordinance on the sale and cultivation of medical marijuana. The city of Merced approved its first 4 dispensaries back in April 20th. And Mendocino County is working on a Mendocino cannabis application project similar to those of wine. California medical cannabis sector generates several $billions in revenue each year, but 1 in 20 Californian adults is estimated to have used medical marijuana for a serious condition. Fully legalizing cannabis for adults would generate about $1 billion per year in taxes, state officials estimate. The state of California is hiring about 126 people and spending $24.6 million on new state regulations in the coming year.
Alrighty. So my next story is more of the news being caught flat-footed today. Got caught flat-footed on the story about, basically Harborside's lawsuit getting thrown out of court, and the biggest dispensary in the nation's lawsuit getting thrown out, or dropped by the DEA and the feds, the DOJ. Okay, so the news completely didn't pay any attention to that, didn't catch any of that. And today didn't catch until they're tripping over themselves that the signatures are in. And now they're tripping over themselves because they got another bombshell today, and that is that Germany just announced that they're going to legalize in 2017. So let's take a look at that.
CNN.com. Wednesday, May 4th, 2016. Germany to legalize medical marijuana by 2017. Germany will legalize medical marijuana next year, the country's health minister said. The German cabinet decided Monday to approve the measure for seriously ill patients who have consulted with doctors and have no therapeutic alternative, according to a press release from the German health minister. Our goal is that seriously ill people are looked after to the best of our ability, Federal Health Minister Hermann Gore said, I don't know. This guy also said he wants health insurance companies to cover costs to patients if patients can't be helped in other ways. Oh, that's nice. Still, Marilyn Mortoller, the country's federal drug commissioner, cautioned that marijuana should not be considered completely safe. Where have we heard people that are profiting off the drug war say that before? The use of cannabis as a medicine within narrow limits is useful and should be explored in more detail, Mortler said. At the same time, cannabis is not a harmless substance. A legalization of private pleasure is not the aim and purpose of this. Well, not yet. It is intended for medical use only. Yeah, not yet. We all seen how this plays out. Like they're going to tell us a news story now. The move comes as a number of countries have begun loosening laws regarding marijuana use and basically telling the UN to take a flying leap off of a fucking short pier, both recreationally and medically. At Amsterdam, in the neighboring Netherlands, is famous for its lax marijuana laws. Across the Pacific, Canada's health minister said the country would be introducing federal marijuana legislation in the spring of 2017. The District of Columbia, Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and Oregon in the United States all have approved recreational marijuana use through though it's still a federal crime in the U.S. Yeah, so much for federal law. And Guam and the 24 American states allow some form of medical marijuana use according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. Further south, Chile recently planted the largest legal marijuana field in Latin America. In 2013, Uruguay became the first nation to fully legalize marijuana for adult recreational use. The law also endowed the state with the power to regulate the plant's production, distribution, and sale. Gee, how did I know that this was going to turn? Let's take a look at this. Let's see how flat-footed CNN got caught here. They rehashed the video of Sanjay Gupta. This video has really nothing to do with this article. They tried to link in a ton of other articles that question the efficacy of marijuana. See the blue highlights? Would you tell your kids you got high? Here at the top, your brain on weed. Okay, that's the video you're looking at. But still, notice they had to put that in? Yeah, Or here, medical marijuana legalized in Australia. The nuns who grow medical marijuana. They're linking to other stories, but they're linking to stories that are prohibitionist stories because everything after April is now the past. And this is now. So what this basically boils down to is an announcement from the German government that they got a press release at CNN. They cobbled together this pathetic little story, tried to basically at the end tell us a little history story here, a little history tale about how far we've come. The District of Columbia, Colorado, Washington, Alaska, and Oregon in the United States all have approved. We have been reading that now since fucking 2013, right? 14. 2 years we've been listening to this bullshit. Padding of news stories. I wish I got paid to just cut and paste all this shit. Nobody pays me.
So that's my Dankrupt show for this Wednesday, May 4th, 2016, right? It is now about 4:20. Oh, how sad. And I don't have weed. It is. It's like 14 after 4 right now. Well, many 420s have passed in the past where I didn't have weed. We were talking about that. Oh my God, we've been through worse than this. This is nothing, and this is probably the last year we'll have to go through any of these sorts of interruptions in our medication. Probably after this, everything's going to change, so it's not so bad to put up with. So I will see you tomorrow for another exciting episode. It's like every day now is Christmas. We're just opening presents, and now Germany's going to legalize. I am just certain that by the summer, we're going to either hear some total shit show horror story from the DEA or they're just going to flip because their options are becoming very limited. So I will see you tomorrow. You stay high and goodbye.
Recreational marijuana in California officially kicks off in San Francisco today. KPIX 5 reporter Ann Makovic is live at the Commonwealth Club where a powerful group of supporters will make the big announcement. Ann?
Yeah, they have been collecting signatures for months, and today they are finally launching the campaign for that ballot measure, which is going to be called the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. Supporters are going to be here on Post Street at the Commonwealth Club to officially announce that they have gathered more than 600,000 signatures to get this measure on the ballot in November. That is much more than they needed. This measure would allow anybody 21 and older to possess and transport up to an ounce of marijuana for recreational use, and you could also grow up to 6 plants. Retail sales would then be taxed 15%.
But I mean, if you take a look at the general cost of federal cannabis prohibition over the years, you're talking about billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, that is one of the supporters of this measure. He's actually with the medical marijuana industry, which is likely going to merge with the recreational industry if this measure does pass. And if California's voters
You
do
mean Steve
approve this measure, we would
D'Angelo,
join
you
Colorado,
dumb
Washington,
idiot
Alaska, and
reporter?
Oregon in legalizing recreational pot. And today's announcement has a broad coalition of support. They're trying to represent all of those different factors of society. Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom is the main speaker today. He's also going to be bringing up doctors, law enforcement agents.
You mean the California Medical Association and the
Live in San Francisco,
NAACP?
Ann Makovic, KPIX 5.
Gee, I could do this job better than her.